This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
The NFC East is Philadelphia's division, and here's why. Every year, someone's season is ruined. Like usually 2 or 3 teams' seasons are ruined by injury. The Eagles were one of those teams last year, and they still managed to make it to the playoffs ahead of Dallas. They are also the only team in their division that has a stable coaching situation. They made no coaching change in a season in which we are going through a pandemic, so there is no offseason program, so all the teams with new coaches are coming in behind the 8 ball.
That was on Get Up on ESPN television this morning. Mike Greenberg coming to the dark side, something you've heard me talk about here on 97.3 ESPN. The NFC East. Should it be the Eagles' division to win? Josh Hennig here on the warm-up. Hoping to have a great Memorial Day weekend. I enjoyed the extra time off. Got to unplug a little bit. Got to catch up on some binge watching. Got to relax a little bit. Did a little extra laundry. No harm in that. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. We got some clips to play you throughout the hour from the Get Up show this morning. As the guys debated who should be the favorite in the NFC East. Plus, as you can check it out at 973ESPN.com, ESPN selected their Sixers all-time team for the Sixers franchise. We'll get into if they did the list right or not. Plus, we'll talk a little bit about the NFL, a little bit the NBA, and of course your text messages, 609-403-0973. It's amazing to me that the debate still rages about the NFC East, because when you have the teams that are constantly being debated, the NFL seems to be revolving around 2 stories. Tom Brady going to Tampa and Dak Prescott's contract situation. And anytime Prescott gets brought up, the NFC East gets brought up. And all the national shows keep bringing it up again and again and again and again about the Philadelphia Eagles. And when you look at the NFC East's 2 main combatants that are the Eagles and the Cowboys, and we know they have 2 of the best quarterback situations in the division. We know that they have 2 of the most recognizable names in the division at head coach. You could argue that Mike McCarthy with a Super Bowl ring, Doug Pederson with a Super Bowl ring, both guys have big names. Both guys have a good pedigree in their coaching background. I mean, most people couldn't pick out Joe Judge out of a lineup if their life depended on it. And Ron Rivera, he's been to a Super Bowl, but his overall coaching record is a little bit just above average. So you have 2 franchises with big name coaches, big name quarterbacks, young talented running backs, questions about how their offenses are going to be run this year, questions about different additions on defense this offseason. So I get there's a lot of conversation to be had about the 2. But as you heard Mike Greenberg say that I've brought up multiple times, to me the biggest difference is the stability of the coaching staff. Whether you're an Eagles fan, a Giants fan, a Cowboys fan, a Redskins fan, or a Steelers fan, I don't care what fandom you are from. If you're being unbiased in your conversation, stability is so important for any sports team, because stability allows for continuity. Continuity allows for better chemistry. Better chemistry allows for better play on the field. And when I look at the Eagles, I see a franchise that is doing everything it can to maintain stability, to maintain continuity, and those things lead to chemistry and better on-field execution. And one of the reasons why the Eagles got to the postseason last year, when they had all the people get injured that they did, was because of the fact that the people who were coming into the offense, the Deontay Burnett's and the Greg Ward and all these guys, it was an offense and a system and a setup that was molded for them to walk into and be productive because it was drilled into them each and every week. And Wentz had been in the same offense for multiple years. Let's be realistic. Daniel Jones of the Giants, he's going to have his second offense in 2 years. Dwayne Haskins, his second offense in 2 years. Dak Prescott, he had stability in his offense, and now he doesn't. Now he's coming in, and they're making changes because there's a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, and they're adding a new receiver who they drafted in the first round, CeeDee Lamb. So there's a lot of moving parts. The Eagles don't have all those moving parts. And what benefited them last year was the stability and the structure and the flexibility that the Eagles had. Let's be realistic. The only thing flexible about Jason Garrett is the fact that he's able to give you different looks on the sideline. Oh, by the way, Jason Garrett's on the offensive staff in New York. Let's see how that works out. I mean, come on. But if you're going to tell me that there's a battle between who should be the favorite for the NFC East, if we're being unbiased, do we not value continuity and stability? Just because someone's a new coach is no guarantee they're going to have success. Just because there's a new guy who added an offseason doesn't mean he's going to fit in. Just because you make moves doesn't mean the moves always work out. We have this idea that just because new is better, but it's not really always better. Just because something is new doesn't guarantee its success. Sometimes Steady Eddie does win the race. Sometimes new and fresh gets figured out and they have trouble adjusting, and by the time they adjust, it's too late. Ryan Clark on Get Up this morning responded to the people who believe that the Cowboys should be the favorite in the NFC East by saying he thinks, this is a Pittsburgh Steeler, Washington Redskins safety, saying the Eagles, why they should win the NFC East. Take a listen.
The Eagles have continuity. They have chemistry. They've also improved. And I say it all the time. When you look at who Carson Wentz was throwing the ball to down the stretch of last season, those weren't not only household names, those weren't names at all. And now you add all the pieces they have on the outside. Miles Sanders getting another year of maturity, and also hoping that Carson Wentz can come in and be healthy throughout the season with Jalen Hurts backing up. This team is the better team when you speak of the two. And I expect Doug Pederson and the Eagles to represent the NFC East in the playoffs.
Now, of course, there are some projections that say that the Cowboys are 48% likely to win the division. Eagles are 45%. And I'm not saying the Cowboys are a distant second behind the Eagles. I don't think we can deny that on paper, the Cowboys probably have the better set of offensive weapons, at least at receiver. I think most people would agree that the combination of Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup is a better trio than Deshaun Jackson, Jalen Reagor, and Greg Ward, mostly because of the fact that Amari Cooper can do more things than Deshaun Jackson can, and that CeeDee Lamb is probably a better blue chip prospect than Greg Ward is at the slot receiver position. Jalen Reagor, Gallup are kind of a wild card because I'm not fully convinced that Gallup is consistent enough in his execution. We haven't seen Jalen Reagor on the field yet. But either way, most people would take the Cowboys receivers over the Eagles receivers. Most people would take the Eagles tight ends over the Cowboys tight ends. Let's just be realistic. Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert are probably better than the majority of teams' tight end groups in the league. Outside of a handful of teams that can rival them, the Eagles have one of the best 1-2 punch tight ends, not just in the league this year, but in the last couple of years. But then it comes down to the quarterbacks, then it comes down to the running backs, and then it comes down to the offensive line. You know, it's Wentz versus Prescott. It's a guy who, in Prescott, who has shown himself very capable in multiple situations to be a very good and steady type of quarterback. But we've also seen Prescott have moments where if he doesn't get the right protection, the offense falls apart around him. We've seen Carson Wentz at times make overthrows, underthrows, hold on to the ball too long. You could argue that maybe Prescott has a little bit better deep throw than Wentz does, that Wentz may be a little bit better in the intermediate routes. So it's coin flip. What's your preference? You know, it's pretty much, to me, I don't think the difference between Wentz and Prescott is great. I don't feel like the difference between those quarterbacks is some huge chasm. We're not talking about, the difference between Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray here. We're not talking about, in another division, the difference between Aaron Rodgers and Mitch Trubisky / Nick Foles situation in Chicago. We're not talking about the difference between a veteran quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger and a rookie like Joe Burrow. There isn't this definitive gap between the two quarterbacks in the NFC East. It's clearly a very close neck for neck, and it just depends on what stats and information you want to pull out to support your debate. When the offensive line, to me, it's a little bit more clear. When Tyron Smith is healthy, he's arguably one of the best left tackles in the NFL. When he's healthy, he's had multiple back issues over the last couple of years. The Cowboys are bringing in a brand new center this year. That's going to be a huge downgrade for them. Travis Frederick, before he had his health issues, was arguably the best center in the league. Now Jason Kelce is the best center, arguably, in the league. And if Brandon Brooks comes back healthy and the whole Eagles offensive line from left to right is set, I would take the Eagles O-line over the Cowboys. But it's subjective. Some people like what the Cowboys have to work with because of the running back situation. Well, I would argue that Miles Sanders is shown himself to be one of the most productive running backs in the league, while Ezekiel Elliott is a better runner. And people believe that Elliott is one of the best 3 running backs in the league by most estimations. I would argue that Sanders may be a more dangerous weapon in the passing game than Elliott is. Elliott's a good weapon, but I think Sanders has potential to be better than him. So, to me, it really comes down to the quarterbacks. Which quarterback do you believe in more? Prescott or Wentz? 609-403-0973. Because if we're going to be honest, the defenses are a bit of a coin flip. The Cowboys made a bunch of replacement adds to their defense, and they still have guys like Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith and DeMarcus Lawrence. If Alden Smith is anything like he used to be before all of his off-the-field issues, he's going to be a force to deal with. But I'm not exactly terrorized by the defensive tackle situation for the Cowboys. I'm not exactly afraid of the Cowboys' secondary situation. And by the way, nobody is particularly scared of the Eagles' linebacker situation. I think Derek Barnett has been a productive but not elite defensive end. If the Eagles get good production out of their DN position, they're going to be very dangerous. You also have the quarterback situation. The Cowboys and the Eagles both have quarterback questions. You lose Byron Jones from the Cowboys. He was a bona fide starter year in and year out. How do they fill that void? The Eagles told Darby to hit the road. They bring in Darius Slay. Who's going to be the second quarterback? Is it Sidney Jones? Is it Avonte Maddox? Who's it going to be? And then whoever's the outside corner, we're assuming that Nickel Roby-Coleman is the nickel corner, but there's no guarantee there. What if he has a poor training camp? We don't know how this pandemic is going to impact people. At safety, Cowboys lost to safety, Eagles lost to safety. Now, I understand that Malcolm Jenkins is a much better safety than Jeff Heath, but losing a safety who's been in your secondary for a while on any team is still going to be a loss. And for the Eagles, they basically seem to have 3 guys all competing for what we assume is one or two positions between Jalen Mills, Will Parks, and Kavon Wallace, the draft pick from Clemson. So as I said, to me, it comes down to quarterback. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Dominique Foxworth believes in Dak Prescott. Dominique Foxworth, the former cornerback for teams like the Broncos, the Ravens, and the Falcons.
It's hard to argue against the Eagles. I think they are a good team, but let's not discount the Cowboys. I think we're splitting hairs right here. They're both very good teams. I don't think anyone will be surprised if either team wins the division. But if we're looking for a difference maker, I'm going to go with my guy Dak throwing the ball. He's the difference maker.
Foxworth says Dak is the difference maker. Now, the problem with saying Dak is the difference maker is that it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, because while Dak and Wentz have similar stats, Dak has played more games. That's a huge factor in all this. So it's not a straight-up comparison, because when you're comparing players, you have to look at how they stack up, and it's hard to judge Prescott and Wentz statistically because of the fact that one guy has played significantly more games. Prescott has not missed the games that Wentz has. Prescott has gotten more opportunities under center than Wentz has. Listen, they were both drafted the same year. They both started week one of their rookie seasons. But Wentz has 56 games under his belt, and Dak has 64. That's a difference of half a season. That's an 8-game difference. That's a huge chasm. So everyone can point to all the stats they won, but it doesn't line up equally. You can say, well, both quarterbacks have 96 touchdown passes. And you can say they have a 1 interception difference. But Dak has that number in 8 more games. Dak has had 8 more opportunities to get to those 97 passing touchdowns. He has had 8 more opportunities to get to that 15,000 plus passing yards to Wentz's 14,000 plus passing yards. Wentz has 2,055 attempts in 8 less games. So Wentz, while he has thrown the ball roughly about 16 less passes than Prescott has played more games. And you can point to the fact that Prescott has more regular season wins, 40 to Wentz's 32. But I ask again, if Prescott has played 64 games and Wentz has played 56 games, and that's a difference of 8, and the difference in wins is 8, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. Now, Dominique Foxworth believes that Prescott is the difference maker. Ryan Clark disagrees.
If the Dallas Cowboys loved Dak as much as you did, dude would get $50 million a year. I do believe that Dak Prescott has an opportunity to ascend and take that next step, but we just haven't seen it in the moments that he needed it most, which was last year in Philadelphia. You're driving to win the game, and you didn't make the plays you needed to make, which is why I put Carson Wentz against Dak Prescott as well.
So one guy points to a guy being a difference maker. The other guy points to he didn't come up in the moment I wanted him to. 609-403-0973. What do you think? 609-403-0973. Dan from EHT chimes in. Dan, hope you had a good weekend. Good to hear from you. Dan says, I am concerned with the NFC East. Teams that bring in new coaches in the recent past seem to turn around quickly. Example, Rams with McVay. The only difference is McCarthy and Rivera, old style that everyone knows. I'm actually more concerned with the Giants, believe it or not. Here's the thing that I would counter to you, and I would say, yes, there's a history of coaches having quick turnarounds, but that was under situations where there wasn't a pandemic going on, and by now you would have had several weeks of OTAs, and you would be coming up on mini camps and rookie mini camps, and then the mandatory mini camp. Now, there's a report that came out today by Yahoo Sports that says that the NFL is going to try to see if they can get all the states on board to try to have a mini camp later in the month of June. May 26th right now, and the hope is that maybe a month from now we'll be into some sort of mini camp for all the teams. Now, that'd be a huge help for teams like the Giants with Joe Judge and Mike McCarthy with the Cowboys and Ron Rivera with the Redskins. But as of right now, there's only so much you can do on Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams and Skype meetings. This is not on the field work. This is not hands-on activity. This isn't working on timing. Not every player and team can be in the same state as each other working out. Tom Brady is fortunate to be in a state like Florida that has much less restrictions on them in their state than a state like New Jersey and Pennsylvania that has had much more difficulty when it comes to this pandemic than Florida has. And while I get that, we're flattening the curve and things are getting better, there's no guarantee that we're completely out of the woods yet. It's May 26th, not August 26th. I was talking about it last week. There's no guarantee from day to day and week to week about anything right now. So don't undervalue, Dan and EHT, the value that the Eagles have the same coaching staff, the same continuity from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 that the other 3 don't. I believe that for teams like the Redskins and the Cowboys and the Giants, they're going to have some issues to start their seasons because they're not going to have the full regimen of an offseason to implement the new offense and the new defense and the new scheme and get the hands-on work with some of these guys. And I'll go even further to say that some of these rookies are probably not going to have huge weeks the first few weeks. We're not going to see this massive impact from, for example, CeeDee Lamb. I think that CeeDee Lamb, as the year progresses, will become more and more of a weapon for the Cowboys. But I don't think it's going to be week 1. Yeah, the Giants drafted an offensive lineman, Andrew Thomas, but I can't guarantee you that Thomas is going to be 100% ready week 1 because he's not going to have a full offseason to learn the Giants' way of doing things, their scheme, their offense, their system. And when it comes to the Redskins, you could argue that Chase Young is probably in the best situation of all the rookies because playing defensive end is not the same amount of moving parts as playing wide receiver in an offense like CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Reagor have to learn. Now, Rager's advantage is that he's surrounded by people in that wide receiver meeting who all know Doug Pederson's offense. Deshaun Jackson knows the Eagles' offense. Greg Ward knows the offense. Zach Ertz can talk to him. Dallas Goedert can talk to him. Even J.J. Arcega-Whiteside was only in the offense for 1 year, can tell him about different aspects of the offense when it comes to the X and the Y. So I understand you may be more concerned about the Giants, but I would say that my concern lessens because of the fact that it is a brand new coaching staff and a brand new offense having to be learned. 609-403-0973. Curtis from Mays Landing chimes in. Curtis chimes in. I'm listening to you on the radio argue about how the Cowboys have no continuity, yet they have the same offensive coordinator they've had last year when Prescott threw for almost 5,000 passing yards and they had one of the best offenses in the NFL. So your argument is flawed. That's Curtis from Mays Landing. And I get it. Kellen Moore is still the offensive coordinator, quote unquote. But you don't think that Mike McCarthy has a different way of running things? You don't think that Mike McCarthy has a different system that he's bringing in overall? You don't think that there's an impact of CeeDee Lamb not getting into OTAs and rookie minicamps like players would in the past to learn the changes in the offense? Curtis, you don't think it's a big deal? You have a brand new center coming in and you're losing a huge part of that continuity? See, you're pointing to one thing. That's the offensive coordinator. But that offense coordinator had a completely different boss last year. That offense coordinator had a completely different center last year. That offense coordinator now is going to have to figure out what his new boss requires and wants from him, how to translate that to the players. He has to teach a new receiver in the slot. They have to get a new center into that system. Continuity is much more than just one coach, Curtis, in Mays Landing. And I appreciate you bringing it up because it's another part of the debate. Yes, Kellen Moore, I get it. But last year, Kellen Moore was doing that under Jason Garrett. Now he's doing it with Mike McCarthy. And remember, one of the reasons why Mike McCarthy got let go in Green Bay was because at the end of his tenure, he had issues with the offense. He had an offensive coordinator. They took over the play calling. Then gave it back. They brought in an offensive coordinator. And no one really knew who was calling the plays from game to game. And there's a controversy between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy. How do I know, Curtis and Mays Landing, that the relationship between Kellen Moore and Mike McCarthy will produce the same level of productivity as the relationship that Moore had with Jason Garrett? I can't guarantee that. I can't promise you that. All right, we got more texts coming up as well. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. Who do you believe in, Prescott or Wentz? Should the Cowboys be the favorites? Should the Eagles be the favorites? I want to hear from you. 609-403-0973. By the way, you can go to 973ESPN.com. Pro Football Focus ranked the situations for the 2020 rookie wide receivers. If you go to 973ESPN.com or the 973 ESPN mobile app, you can check out where Pro Football Focus ranked Jalen Reagor on the list of best situations for rookie wide receivers coming in to the 2020 season. I'm Josh Hennig here in the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig back here in the warm-up, 97.3 ESPN. Again, hope you all had a great holiday weekend. Stayed safe. Maybe pretty basic this weekend. I know I certainly did. Although I'm not the best person to take social advice from because I'm not exactly Mr. Over the Top myself. By the way, today the NHL will announce this afternoon, Eastern Time, around 4:30, the return-to-play plan for the 2019-2020 season. Along with this format, they will announce the 2014 playoff format that was agreed upon between the NHL and the NHLPA. So want to stay tuned to the Sports Bash this afternoon because coming up later today at 5:30, Kevin Durso, 97.3 ESPN.com. Flyers Insider will join Mike Gill and Hunter Brody, talk all about what that 2014 format is and what it means for the Flyers. Because right now, the Flyers are the 4 seed. So they wouldn't be involved in that 5 through 12 play-in format. So how do the Flyers tune up? What does the return to play say for a team that is a top 4 seed that doesn't have to be involved in the play-in for this 2019-2020 NHL return to season plan? They get all of that coming up later today on the Sports Bash. Mike Gill, Hunter Brody, 2 to 6. Kevin Durso will join them at 5:30 to react to all of the NHL's announcements later this afternoon, right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. And don't forget the free 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Back to the text. Text came in and says, I put Doug Pederson at a higher tier than the other NFC East coaches. Pederson is a top 5 in the league, in this texter's opinion. What he did with Foles that season was unreal. He changed the entire scheme to what Foles did best. Doug is a different breed. That's what the text board says. My only problem with saying Doug is a top 5 head coach is because when I look around the NFL, I think most people agree for certain, or at least they should, who the top three are. The top three, in no particular order, is Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, Pete Carroll. Most people agree that's your definitive 1 through 3. After those three, it's kind of debatable who the next several are, because Sean McVay has taken to a team to the Super Bowl. He's turned the Rams around. We know that Kyle Shanahan has turned the 49ers around. He's gone to a Super Bowl. We know that Ron Rivera, who's now in Washington, took the Panthers to the Super Bowl, but his other years, he's had some pretty mediocre records. Dan Quinn, taking a team to the Super Bowl, not done a ton since. People think a lot of Sean Payton, but he was in the Super Bowl, 10 years ago? And since then, they haven't had a ton of playoff appearances with Drew Brees. They've had a few 8-8, 9-7 seasons, wedged in there over the years. And for all the great stats that Drew Brees has put up, it's not like year in and year out they're a Super Bowl contender. I don't think anybody thinks Matt LaFleur is a top 5, top 10 coach right now in Green Bay. What's your opinion of Mike Zimmer? A lot of players think highly of him. The Vikings organization does, but he's never been to a NFC championship game in these last several years. It's a league of what have you done for me lately? Look around the NFL. How do you feel about Mike Tomlin? Mike Tomlin has been in Pittsburgh for a long time, and his 2 Super Bowl appearances and his 1-1 Super Bowl record was a decade ago. A lot has changed in the NFL and with the Steelers since the last time they were in the Super Bowl, since the last time they won a Super Bowl. While a lot of people may like Mike Tomlin, it's a results-oriented business. John Harbaugh, he took the Ravens to a Super Bowl, but that was 7 years ago? You got a different quarterback now, a different offense now, a different defense now. How does that all impact the organization? Sure, it's stability, but again, what have you done for me lately? You had the league MVP last year and you couldn't get to the AFC Championship game. And where does that leave Mike Vrabel? He took a team with Ryan Tannehill as their quarterback and went to an AFC Championship game. I don't think anybody thinks Ryan Tannehill is a top 5 quarterback. So where does that make Mike Vrabel? Is he a top 10 head coach? Is he a top 5 head coach? So to say Doug Pederson is a top 5 head coach, I think it's a little bit of a reach, because it really depends on how do you rank the other head coaches. Because after Belichick and Reid and Carroll, to me, it's a bit of a mismatch. Because you look at the head coaches who have won Super Bowls in the last several years. Look at the names. Andy Reid last year, the year before Belichick, the year before Doug Pederson. And then all the guys before that who've either reached Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl. Unless your name is Bill Belichick, you're not getting to the championship game in your conference each and every year. Mike Zimmer took the Vikings to 1 conference championship, and the Vikings imploded in Philadelphia. What am I supposed to do with that information? He did it with Case Keenum. He gets a quote-unquote better quarterback than Kirk Cousins, can't get back. Sam Bradford had one of the highest completion percentage seasons in NFL history is in a Vikings uniform. And they didn't make a deep playoff run. What am I supposed to do with that information? How do I really rate Mike Zimmer? He's been to a championship game, but not a Super Bowl. What do I do with that information? So how do you rank head coaches? And to me, I think part of the problem with ranking head coaches is how do we weigh championship success? What is more important? A head coach getting to the Super Bowl or getting to the playoffs every year? What is more important? Being in the running to win your division every year or having one huge playoff run? It's not like the Falcons are hands down the best team in their division each and every year to win. Some years they've won. Some years the Saints have won. Panthers won the division a few years ago under Ron Rivera. And now with Tampa coming along with Tom Brady, how does that change the dynamic of that division? I mean, if you were to ask me who's the best coach in the NFC South, I think most people would say it's Sean Payton. But Sean Payton He won a Super Bowl, 10, 11 years ago? So where does he rank? So I get what you're saying, Texter. Doug Pederson, you believe is the top 5 head coach. But how do you measure the other head coaches around him? Doug Pederson has only been an NFL head coach since 2016. You have coaches like Tomlin and John Harbaugh and others who have been with Sean Payton, been with their organization for years and years and years, longer than Doug has. Mike Zimmer's been in Minnesota longer. How do you rate those guys? Payton's won a Super Bowl. That was 10 years ago. Quinn's been to a Super Bowl, lost 28-3 lead. Mike Zimmer got to a conference championship game and got crushed in Philadelphia. Sean McVay's been to a Super Bowl, but he lost in arguably the biggest defensive battle in Super Bowl history. So it's hard to measure who the best head coach is. And if your big argument is Doug Pederson won with Nick Foles, okay. But you know who else has won Super Bowls? Trent Dilfer, Brad Johnson, Mark Rippon. It's not like there's a murderer's row of quarterbacks who have won Super Bowls. I mean, who's really better? Joe Flacco or Nick Foles? Depends on who you ask. If you're an Eagles fan, you're going to say Nick Foles for sure. If you're not an Eagles fan, you might go Flacco. Who's the better quarterback? Nick Foles or Mark Rippon? That 1 year Rippon had was a pretty special year. He didn't do much else with his career after that, but for that 1 year with the Redskins when they won that Super Bowl, he was really good. But who's a better quarterback, Foles or Rippon? Kind of a coin toss. Unless your name is Brady or Russell Wilson or Pat Mahomes, in the last decade, the majority of quarterbacks who are winning rings, I mean, it's Eli Manning beating the Patriots twice. And who would you rather have, Eli or Nick Foles? If you're an Eagles fan, you say Nick Foles. If you're a Giants fan, you say Eli Manning. If you're a Patriots fan, you probably tell us all to shut up and go away. All right? Like, it's so subjective. It's a fun conversation, though, and I'm here all for it. Which brings me to the next text, because it is about head coaching. A little bit more of a serious topic. We did talk with Jim Rooney on Fridays, the warm-up, and if you missed that interview, you can go to 97.3 ESPN.com. Jim Rooney, the son of Dan Rooney, the man behind the Rooney Rule. The text comes in and says, what is your stand on the updates that the Rooney Rule rewarding teams with minority GMs and head coaches? Well, first of all, I think you misunderstood the news text, and I'm glad you brought this up. The proposal to give teams who hire a minority to a coaching position or a GM that they would get draft picks, that decision was tabled. The new Rooney Rule states that you have to interview more than one now. So if you're hiring a head coach, you have to interview not one, but 2 minority candidates. If you are hiring a coordinator, you have to interview a minority. If you're hiring a GM, you have to interview a minority and multiple minorities. So what they're basically doing is they're forcing teams to expand their searches to more than a couple people. So you can't just have the one guy come in like a Deuce Staley or an Eric Bieniemy come in and be your Rooney Rule candidate. You got to bring in more than one. So that's what the rule change, the biggest part of the rule change is. And if you're going to hire an offensive coordinator, for example, the Cowboys couldn't have just kept Kellen Moore. They would have had to go out and interview another person, whoever that person could be for that coordinator. I mean, heck, they could have even called Kevin Sumlin, for goodness sake, if they wanted to. But because the Cowboys didn't have to interview any minority candidates for the coordinator, they could just keep Kellen Moore. And because they only had to interview one minority candidate for the head coach, they fast-tracked Mike McCarthy into the building to sign when they only interviewed Marvin Lewis as a potential guy. They would have had to interview 2 people. So it would have slowed down the express lane to get to Mike McCarthy. Now, my personal opinion of it is I think it's a step in the right direction, but I think the bigger problem for me, in my opinion, is this is less an issue of minorities getting interview opportunities. It's just an understanding of your favorite candidate to take a job may not be the best candidate. You know, I mentioned this to Jim Rooney on the show on Friday, and that is Doug Pederson was not the Eagles' first or second choice to be the head coach. He was probably the third or fourth choice. He was, at least as far as we know, the fourth guy to interview, because we know that they brought in Deuce Stanley to fill the Rooney role to interview. They had brought in Adam Gase and Ben McAdoo. There were reports that the Eagles were interested in Tom Coughlin. He said no thanks, and then they brought in Doug Pederson. Apparently, that's from what we understand, the chronology of events. Well, if you didn't have Gase say no and go to Miami, and McAdoo get wooed to come back to New York, Doug Pederson may never have been here, and Doug may never have gotten the opportunity to be the head coach, and the Eagles would arguably be an embarrassment if your head coach was Gase or McAdoo right now. So I think the bigger issue, at least in my opinion, is less about just giving minorities opportunities. It's just interviewing coaches in general. It's just giving guys the opportunity to interview as a general principle. By the way, thanks to Mike Gill for saying this to me, the odds for the Coach of the Year in 2020, if you want to put some money on it for the people who are saying that Doug Pederson is so great, it's 25-1. It's a pretty good odds. The guy who texted in and said that Doug Pederson is the top 5 coach. I wish you put your money where your mouth is. I mean, 25-1 odds for Coach of the Year. Pretty juicy. Bill Belichick is tied for first, 12-1, along with Bruce Arians. And then Mike McCarthy is 14-1. I wouldn't take that bet. I think that McCarthy is going to probably have more of a closer 9-7, 10-6 season in Dallas. Frank Reich is 16-1. That's an interesting one. They've improved the team. Andy Reid is 18-1, along with Kevin Stefanski. I think that's just appeasing a lot of the Brown gamblers out there. Kingsbury and McDermott with the Cardinals and the Bills, respectively, are also 18-1. Kyle Shanahan, 20-1. Mike Vrabel, 22-1. And Doug Pederson's all the way down. He's tied with Brian Flores, the Dolphins, John Harbaugh, the Ravens, and Vic Fangio, Fangs, from the Broncos at 25-1. So, you think Doug Pederson's a top 5 head coach? Got some good odds to make some money on that bet. Just saying. All right, we'll get to more of your text messages coming up. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. Josh Hennig here on the warm-up. Get more of your texts and wrap up the show coming up next here on the warm-up 97.3 ESPN. Lead up to the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody.
Bring 'em out, bring 'em out. Bring 'em out, bring 'em out. Bring 'em out, bring 'em out.
You know, as I look deeper at these coaching odds to win Coach of the Year in 2020, the more I'm starting to wonder about the best value. That Sean McDermott 18-1 is looking real appealing right now. Listen, if you're the Bills, you may be the best team to have a chance to win the AFC East in over a decade. And the Bills are a pretty good team. And they've improved with Stephon Diggs. They may win. The Patriots still may make the playoffs, but they might not win the division, man. Yeah, Doug Pederson's 25-1, along with John Harbaugh, Brian Flores, and Vic Fangio. Now, if Brian Flores and the Dolphins win the division, who's the starting quarterback the whole year? Does Tua come in and play, or is it the Mountain Man Fitzpatrick playing all year? That's a good question. If you dig deep on this list, you start scrolling down and scrolling down. There's one more name that stands out to me on this list. Pete Carroll is 28-1. I don't know about you, but that NFC West is going to be a war this year. The Cardinals got better. The Seahawks are still a good team. 49ers coming off of a Super Bowl appearance. Rams are a couple years removed from a Super Bowl appearance. That division is going to be a war. By the way, if you want to waste your money, Doug Marrone, the Jags head coach, is 50-1 to win Coach of the Year. in case you want to waste your money. 609-403-0973. Josh Hennig here on the warm-up. You go to 973ESPN.com. We have posted up there who ESPN selected. Not us at 97.3 ESPN, but ESPN up north in Bristol picked for their all-time Sixers team. I did want to touch on this. So their all-time Sixers team breaks down like this. Allen Iverson, Hal Greer, Julius Erving, Charles Barkley, and Wilt Chamberlain. Now, what's interesting about this list is two things. One is the fact that one of the players on this list was playing basketball before half of us were born. So Hal Greer is the staple of the 1960s. He's a Basketball Hall of Famer. He's one of the highest scorers in Sixers franchise history. The guy's got a ton of all-star appearances. So I know for some people, he's a guy that you have to really look up to figure out who he is. The other name that's interesting on this list is Wilt Chamberlain because, one, Wilt Chamberlain played a lot of years in Philadelphia, but not a lot of years for the Sixers. He played for the Philadelphia Warriors, then for the 76ers, before he eventually went out to the Lakers. So he doesn't have the length of career in a Sixers uniform that a guy like Iverson or Julius Erving does. The other thing with Chamberlain is that if Joel Embiid ever reaches his potential, does Wilt Chamberlain get knocked off that list? You know, we were talking about where Doug Pederson stands among the NFL, among head coaches, and possibly in even Eagles history, which I think some people believe he might be, if not the best, one of the two best coaches in Eagles history, him and Andy Reid. But you look at Wilt Chamberlain, very soon, if Joel Embiid has a few more seasons of elite basketball, his career will have lasted in Philadelphia longer than Wilt Chamberlain. And then how do you rate the greatest center of all time in Sixers history? Because you forget about Moses Malone, too. Malone won a ring here. So did Wilt. If Joel Embiid has 10 All-Star appearances and plays in the Sixers uniform for over 10 years, but doesn't win a championship, then what?